up on youtube.com/smooth981 FM Lagos. Good morning, YouTube. Good morning, world. And good morning to Wadi Ahime, who's going to be joining me for today's Freshly Pressed. Good morning, Wadi.
Good morning, Shopper. Good morning, Lagos.
Great to have you on the show once more.
Always great to be here.
All right. So if you are viewing us, make sure you join the conversation up on the live chat and leave your comments there so we can see what your take is on the news. You can also send WhatsApp messages into 0809 440 and you can go to Twitter by using the hashtag freshlypressed981. You can also tag us at smooth981fm. So lots of news to discuss today, and what we're going to do first of all is take a look at what's the regional body has to say. The Economic Community of West African States was in the country, or a delegation of ECOWAS was in the country, with an eye on 2023. From the Daily Trust, 2023, Nigeria must get it right for Africa's sake, says ECOWAS. They say, given the leadership role that Nigeria plays in the sub-region. So we heard from a delegation of ECOWAS's pre-election fact-finding mission, rather, to Nigeria, which was led by Dr. Kwado Afarigian, who's the former chairman of the Electoral Commission of Ghana, who visited the INEC headquarters yesterday and had quite a bit to say about Nigeria's role on the regional level as well. Wadi, I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Well, we hear this every time an election is coming up in Nigeria. We heard it.
But it doesn't lose its potency, though, does it?
No, it doesn't. But the fact remains that we need to get it right. I guess to a large extent, we've been getting it right in running the elections. To a large extent, there's been skirmishes here and there, but excuse me. But I do think that at the end of the day, the 2023 elections are, for me, quite special because rather than have just two main candidates, we have three now, and the intricacies of campaigning and the back and forth that we've heard from all the parties with respect to having a free and fair elections, the signing of the peace accord, which is the usual thing before the election campaigns go off in Nigeria these days, just goes to show that at least we're heading in the right direction, with INEC continually telling us that they would try to the best of their ability to hold a fair and fair election. And with the rallies that we've seen across Nigeria, less skirmishes than before, just makes me believe that these elections in 2023 though quite crucial to move Nigeria, I guess, back to the mainframe of African politics. It's essential that every party understands what they need to do, campaign fairly, ensure that they go out and speak to their voters or their prospective voters on what they plan to do for the country, how they plan to go about it, and so on. So this is just ECOWAS reiterating the fact that if Nigeria can get it right, and it's not just ECOWAS, it's all across the African continent, that if Nigeria gets its leadership system right, we just would not be the giant of Africa by name, but the giant of Africa by act and leading, going back to leading the African discourse on the global stage.
And considering the fact that we've seen from 2021 into 2022 a wave of coups in Africa and also on the West African front, of course, this election kind of is also a real signpost as to how democracy can work. But not just that, not just even the basics of free and fair elections. As Nigeria, with Nigeria as a regional hegemon, should we not also be seeing Nigeria kind of trying to push the envelope forward in terms of what we can do for the voting public, i.e., making sure that we're at the forefront when it comes to the electoral details, such as, I don't know, making sure that more people are included as opposed to excluded, with INEC doing a lot more to.
Well, to a large, like I said, to a large extent, this election cycle has shown that more and more people are getting interested in the electioneering
But now we also have Nigerians in the diaspora who don't get a say at home, even though they are remitting
Well,
money at home.
we will get there with the electronic voting that has started. If we get it right in 2023, then next thing that will probably happen is have the ability for Nigerians in diaspora to also have a say in who who leads the conduct of the affairs of Nigeria. So this is this is a huge trying point for the country. Electoral transmission, the beavers, and all, and we've seen it working in Ekiti and Oshun, and we've seen the outcomes. And so this is really the test. If we get it right in 2023, then we're just beginning the journey towards better electionary processes, more and more people getting involved, aside from those who live in the country, along with those in diaspora. I'm one who believes that diasporans should be able to have a say in how elections are conducted in Nigeria. We've seen it happen in Kenya in the last elections, and that was a conscious effort over a two-term period by the Kenyan president to pass legislation that would drive that.
All right, let's take a look at this next article in from the Punch newspaper. Atiku, Tinubu, and Obi demand security beef up and reject campaign suspension. Well, less the people, more the campaign organizations, the presidential campaign organizations of the different parties of the PDP, of the APC, and the Labour Party, who have demanded increased security on campaign grounds. This against the backdrop of the terror alerts that were issued on Sunday by the United States Mission and the British High Commission in Nigeria, with the councils also insisting that they would not suspend their rallies. What are your thoughts?
I don't think that the political parties should suspend their rallies. We shouldn't give in to terrorism, which has been a bane in Nigeria over the last 10 to 15 years. The fact remains that um, yes, there's a high level of insecurity in Nigeria, but the government, along even with the parties, should sit down and work out what the formalities and the modalities should be to ensuring that there is enough security not only at campaign grounds but all across the nation. Um, every day we hear of killings, kidnappings, you just name it. But if we do suspend the campaigns because of a terror threat, what it then means is that we're carrying to terrorists, and knowing top, well, let me not call them the reliable nations, ensure that we don't give in to those kind of acts. And at the end of the day, I think this is what will happen. All the parties have clearly stated the need for increased security at campaign rallies, the need for them to work out their security architecture towards ensuring there are no riots or there are no terrorist acts, and so on. But they also need to sit down with the security operatives, and so that they also have an idea of how these campaign rallies will be, when it will be, where it will be, so that you can provide all the necessary logistics for them. And I guess it's something that for me is a non-debatable issue. But the government should also sit down and assure Nigerians that they will provide the necessary kind of security. We don't want a situation whereby something happens at a campaign ground and a prominent person, is injured or even loses his or her life.
Not even a prominent person, a person, because value of a human life is a real thing in Nigeria.
True, I agree with you, Shopwell, but you know what it can cause. Unfortunately, Nigerians have been losing their lives in droves over the last God knows how long. But it doesn't change the fact that the government has not been able to provide the needed security within the country, and it's a shame. My sincere condolences to all the families who've lost loved ones, those lost their lives. It's a pity.
Okay, you know what? Let's actually just talk about some of that, right? Because what I'm seeing from these stories right now is a focus on, okay, information being given, but then what to do and how to act on the information. From the Daily Post, we have this one in: states disregarded our early warnings and flood forecasts. That's what the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, NIMET, has said. I'm saying that its forecasts on flooding went ignored by most state governments across the country. So we heard from Professor Mansour Matazu, who's the Director General of NIMET, represented on Monday by Mailadi Abba, the Director Director of Weather Forecasting Services at the agency in Lagos during the commencement of a needs assessment workshop for stakeholders in the maritime, oil, and gas sector, said, and I quote, the agency had that. Or rather, said that the agency had, quote, let me just paraphrase, had issued early warnings on the possibility of floods across most states of the Federation before the commencement of the rains, but lamented that the warnings went disregarded by most stakeholders. All right, let's get back to information and information management then.
That's very true. I can remember as early as I think it was April, March or April, where um, the meteorological agencies had cautioned Nigerians about the high levels of rains and possible flooding across the country.
Let me just give to take this quote. We gave the warnings and weather for each state, not just generally for each state, but whether the states adhered to it or not, we are now seeing the results.
And that for me is really really important. How does the federal agency work with state agencies? Do the states even have these agencies in their ministries or departments in their ministries? How is the collaboration done? Because if the national agency gives that warning, what I think should be done or should have been done is working with the state agencies or the state ministries in charge of weather and other disaster issues, and sitting down and coordinating a national response to it. What we've seen with the flooding is that the national response has, well, when I say national, I'm not just talking about the federal government. Even some of the states, their responses have been abysmal, just to say the least.
That is saying the least. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, what you see is lives have been lost, properties damaged in billions of naira. Lives that have been lost cannot be replaced. People losing not just their homes, but even their source of income. And the other thing about it is, we listening to Business Express this morning, the potential impact on food.
I feel like it's more like the inevitable impact on food because we've already heard that it's not a question of in but if but a question of when.
So it's like different kegs of dynamite that are going to blow up, and it's just blowing up one after the other, and we're not proactive to it. That's the first thing. And now we're not even reacting to these things, and we can see them glaringly. I yesterday we saw stations, or some stations with queues on them, and these are all going to impact the food prices at the end of the day. So with this kind of information that is passed out by the national agency, I do believe that states should have had or should be sitting down with the agencies and working out modalities. How do we prevent them? How do we take this information to all our stakeholders to advise them and move them into whether higher planes, and maybe would have reduced the level of death and even property destruction across the floodplains.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. All right, let's take a quick break. When we get back, we'll take more and we'll take your messages on 0809 which is the WhatsApp platform. We'll also go over to youtube.com/smooth981 FM Lagos to see what you have to say, and use the hashtag freshlypressed981 up on Twitter. We will be right back after this.
Hey, what's up? This is Gary.
What story is it?
Stay locked right here.
Food security.
What number is that?
There are three people whose
4,
calls
I
have
think.
witnessed the world.
So we've done.
No? Oh, sorry. Monitor rainfall pattern, Lagos.
That's 6.
Yeah, that's 6. And then food insecurity.
As food insecurity
Is
is
number 4.
So we've done one.
We have done. Give me 1 second.
137. 1 to 7.
1 to 7.
You think it's
So
more
we're
than
going to
just
6
his job.
4.
Oh, that's why Dele is my person, because
Oh,
he's
man.
invested in my tomorrow.
At ARM, we want to help you achieve your goals because when you succeed, we succeed. Visit www.arm.com.ng. ARM, invested in your tomorrow.
Hi Lagos, my name is Buchi Franklin and you're listening to The Smooth Breakfast.
Oh, I have kind of lost my place.
Are you back
Let
on?
me find it. Yes, give me 1 second. All right, there we go. Monitor rainfall pattern. All right, here we are back for the second half of Freshly Pressed here on Smooth Breakfast. I'll just take this message from Dami from Ikeja, who says, talking about cowering to terrorists, tell that to the communities who have to pay protection money to bandits and Islamists just to exist day by day. His thoughts. From the Punch newspaper, let's stick with the flood warnings. Now, this time around, we're going to be in Lagos State, where the state government has advised residents to monitor the rainfall pattern. This waterfront residents of Ikoyi, Lekki, Victoria Island, as well as coastal areas of Ekpe and Badagry, Lagos State government has advised residents to monitor incidental rainfall as this would contribute to water backflow due to the high tide in the Lagos Lagoon. We heard from the state commissioner for the environment and water resources, giving this advice in a statement on Monday and this is kind of a reaction to a viral video of the water level at the third mainland bridge, which he described as fake news that made the rounds and had a lot of people talking, and said that, and I'm going to quote, the trending video of the water level under the third mainland bridge almost being filled to the brim is fake news because the video only captured the Oromoshoki end of the third mainland bridge, which is normal because the area is a deck on the pile. Anyway, he goes on to say a lot more, but I'll just take that quote and come over to you now, Wadi.
Well, he also advised all residents in who potential affected areas of Lagos Island and the coastal areas, Ikoyi, VI, um, the Lake Ajaxes, to be aware of the fact that there are rising levels of tide. And this is because the channels are so full and there's no way really to evacuate the water. This warning should be heeded. People should not think that, oh, it can happen to their community. We've seen what has happened across the River Niger, River Benue belt of Nigeria, with humongous flood swallowing communities. So
Devastating effects.
people should be wary of this. The tides are quite high. Even when I'm driving down the bridge in the morning, I see that the water levels are quite high. It will take a bit of time. Fortunately, we're getting into the dry season, so we expect that the tides will go down a bit more. But the issue of flooding is not just in Nigeria, it's across the world, and it's an issue that has to be dealt with not just by Nigerians but globally from a climate change perspective. And that for me is an issue that I think Nigeria has signed on to the climate change agreement. How are we going to put that into proper perspective and start to put in place things that would change the way we see climate change? That's one. The second one is how often are we going to ensure that we evacuate all our drainage systems and ensure that they are not blocked and all. Some of the reasons I think the channels are not flowing properly out is because of blockages and all. We know from time to time that the Lagos State government does clear out a number of those things. But the issue for me, you clear them out, you pack them at the edge of the road, and then the next rains come and they are all washed back in. So we need to have a system that coordinates everybody, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Works, and all, who ensure that all these things are done in a proper manner, and the particles that block the drainage systems are cleared out completely. And I do think with that we'll be, to a large extent, be able to deal with a number of these issues, except from the fact where the lagoons rise too high, or the rivers that cut across the countries, the water levels are just too high, and they have nowhere else than to push it out into land.
All right, I'll take this message, Bidemi from Third Mainland Bridge, saying the rising water level around the Third Mainland Bridge is visible to the blind. Our government officials never want to accept and they're always quick to debunk. Whilst Shegun says if only other state governments had kept updating their citizens about flooding and flood threats like Lagos State. And Gilbert Musa from Festac says on the information provided by the weather agency to the state, in my thinking, the floods in Lagos in 2004, when Victoria Island was flooded in particular, should have been a warning to other states to be proactive before the agency comes out with information. All right, let's take a look at this next one as we everything links together at this point, Wadi. So, from the leadership newspaper, Nigeria can end food insecurity in 10 years, according to the vice president, Yemi Oshibajo, who talked about the or rather represented the president, President Buhari, on Monday at the official launch of the Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zone, and said that that program can help Nigeria in less than a decade to banish food insecurity whilst radically improving export earnings from agriculture, which is something that I would love to see, and as well as creating millions of lucrative agro-industrial jobs and opportunities for its citizens. Do you agree?
I agree.
Okay.
However, but this is better late than never. However, why now? Why are we just starting at the end of this administration? One of the key things this administration promised us in 2015 was, oh, agriculture was going to be a mainstay. But we haven't left the fact that oil is still the mainstay. Because of oil, we pay so much money. Um, as such, have budget deficits across God knows where. Um, Reading the news yesterday, they're looking at another 11 trillion. It's moved from 7 trillion to 11 trillion in 2023 for oil subsidies. This I'm glad they're starting. They're starting this. I hope whoever comes in the next administration will actually look at the details of this and see how we can implement it. There is need for the agricultural value chain to really be properly developed, and which for me is one of the biggest challenges we see on the agricultural value chain. We still believe in what's the name again? The basic types of farming, rather than having mechanized farms where people can actually be able to partner with farmers, can partner with those who have the technology and the equipment to drive large scale farming and increase food production across Nigeria. Business Express, like I said earlier, shared with us the fact that the bag of rice has moved from 36,000 in a space of 1 week to 40,000. And these are things that this the administration had promised us were going to be priority. And aside from seeing the pyramids of rice and other produce, we haven't seen that that strategic focus on how we can develop our agricultural sector. Huge gains have been made, no doubt, no doubt about that. With more and more people going into some form of mechanized and technology driven farming. But the fact still remains that we're not feeding ourselves, we're not exporting enough, which should be a huge part of our foreign exchange. Remember in the 60s and the early 70s, before fuel, where Nigeria was known for its rubber, its cocoa, its granite pyramids, and they were huge foreign exchange earners. Today, we can't even feed ourselves, and that for me is not how we should go. So I hope that this 5-year program, which has been kicked off by the vice president yesterday, will be um, fully looked at. Like I said, it's better late than never. The next administration, whoever becomes the president of Nigeria, would look at the details of it and see how we can partner with the private sector and every other one towards, like he says, in 10 years become food sufficient and not dependent on food imports.
It's quite interesting when the vice president talked about the agricultural sector being pivotal in pulling the economy out of recession and the single largest employer of labor. But considering the fact that we would need to get into um, real industrialization and mechanization of farming, I wonder what kind of effect that would have as well on
They had 7 years to do that,
labor.
but they started now.
That'll be interesting. All right, so here from Magodo says all this talk about being proactive. Ironically, being proactive is only realistic in the long and not the short term. Only when certain key things have been done over the span of months and years can one swing into proactivity. There has been a complete breakdown of key actions. For decades, proactivity at this point is out of the question, says Toyin. And Idima Puza from Surulere says Nigeria could end food shortage in about 3 years if proper planning is put into agriculture. Mechanized farming is the key to achieving that, all with exclamation points. All right. And D from Alausa is liking your analysis, Wadi. All
Thank
right,
you
let's
very
take a
much.
look at our next article in uh, let's take a look. Next article comes in from the Guardian newspaper. Government dares foreign airlines to shut down operations and threatens reciprocity. This was yesterday. The federal government saying that the foreign airlines operating in the country should make good their threats to shut down operations, and also berated the airlines for failing to employ a good number of Nigerians, noting that other nationals are more in the employment of the foreign carriers than Nigerians. Oh, Wadi, what are your thoughts on this?
To a large extent, I do agree with the federal government that we should push back on some of those things. However, if you want to push back on things like this, then you must set out the structures and the systems that work well. Um, First and foremost, the Nigerian aviation system, the sector itself, do they have the capacity? Because at the end, you would read what the chairman of Airpeace said that foreign for other countries should give us more slots to fly into their country. The first question is, do you have enough planes? Do you have enough what's it called? Um, um, do you have enough planes to take up these slots? We've seen even the slots that some of them have, they don't meet them as at when due. That's one. Two, the other thing is that for me, Nigeria has, and I don't know why, some of the highest ticketing regime, and a lot of it comes from the fact that there's so many taxes along it.
High taxes.
Yeah, the taxes are extreme. Taxes are almost 90% of the cost of, of the ticket itself, and at the end of the day, we pay almost twice as much to fly than other countries do. So what exactly are we doing with the taxes? The taxes that come in, where have they been? Where have the money been put in? They're not improving the infrastructure. They're not giving the players in the industry a, a a structure where it makes it easier for them to be able to either lease larger planes, buy larger planes, and even take up this so-called gap that is being filled by foreign airlines. And when your system doesn't meet in quote the international expectations, nobody's going to let you fly into their countries, or nobody's going to let you take off from their countries. Air disasters are something that you know a lot of countries are trying to avoid and avert. And with that, I just think the government should sit back, work with those in that sector, work with those and come out with a blueprint towards how best we can, one, reduce the cost of flying, two, improve the mechanical and technical systems that are required within the sector, three, have more international class airports that people can fly to. If you're not flying to Lagos, Abuja, or Port Harcourt, and for a while, Port Harcourt wasn't even operating international flights, and Kano, then where are you flying to? And it's not that when you fly into these airports, it's easy for you to get a local flight, you know, every 45 minutes that takes you anywhere. the delays within the system are so rampant, and we expect that things will improve. Yes, the bluff is fine, but at the end of the day, are we going to pay that money? Yes, we will. When? I really don't know.
It's quite interesting that I talk about that the minister said that we're not afraid of being shut down. The country can thrive without the operations of foreign airlines, and talked about being the biggest markets in Africa. But then even looking at, let's say, the top 10 most lucrative flights, or top 10 most lucrative routes in Africa, there's not one that is centered in Nigeria. So that's quite an interesting one. I remember discussing that much earlier in an episode of Business Express. Anyway, so we've come to the end of the show. Wade Ahimi, thank you so much for joining me. You can find him up on Twitter. He is at Wade Ahimi _. Make sure you find him, follow him, and converse with him up on that platform. Wade, I shall see you once more in First Press next week. Thank you so much for joining me for today.
Thanks for always having me in the studio. Have a great day, everyone.
All right, and that is that coming up. It is going to be the Grapevine at 8:15. Do not go anywhere.
Invested in your tomorrow. The headlines.